Hello and welcome back as we continue this companion series to A.K. Warder's Grammar Guide, An Introduction to Pali. And today it's lesson 25, which mainly considers derivation in Pali as well as abstract nouns. This is Pali Studies on the Learn Pali channel. So, in lesson 25, we go right back to the beginning and return to morphology, that is, how words are derived, which we first saw right back in the introduction. The ancient grammarians separated Pali into four classes of words, the major division being between those that inflected, altered their endings, and those that didn't, like the indeclinables and the prefixes. And with the words that inflected, if we take the verbs as an example, as this should be more familiar, we can distinguish the inflectional ending, which are common to many verbs, and they convey the grammatical information like person, number, tense and mood, etc., and the remaining part that we call the stem. So if we strip off the inflection from bhavati, we get the stem bhava. And this in turn can be further broken down into a root which has undergone modification, often being strengthened before the addition of a derivational affix. The root is the ultimate core of the word that carries the essential meaning, and though it's common to express the meaning of roots with an infinitive expression, bu, to be, or gam, to go, it must be understood that the root is not an infinitive, nor is it truly a verb or a noun, but simply a primary element expressing a vague idea. Derivational affixes too have no independent existence of their own, but merely modify the meaning of the root. Traditional grammars distinguish primary derivation of stems, those that are formed directly on the root by some modification, either by an internal change like strengthening or duplication of the first syllable, and the addition of an infix. If you remember from lesson 1, present stem verbs are formed in one of 10 ways. If prefixes are added, or the stem undergoes further modification by the addition of other suffixes, so-called secondary derivatives are developed. And counterintuitively, these additional suffixes tend to be inserted before the primary, at least in verbs. Now, this system of derivation doesn't just apply to verbs. Theoretically, at least, all inflectable words in Pali, including nouns, can ultimately be derived from a common set of roots. For instance, from the root ch, to steal, we get chora, a thief. Whenever strengthening takes place due to the addition of a suffix, the ancient grammarians indicated this with a symbol called an anubandha. This just indicates that the strengthening is to take place and isn't part of the affix itself, which may then follow. And generally a retroflex n is used to indicate this. Though note, most modern grammar guides don't use this anubandha symbol. Now, there are far too many primary suffixes to be usefully listed here. If you wish for more information, there are links down in the description below. But it's worth noting that many of the verbal nouns that we've looked at so far can be classed as primary derivatives. And likewise, if prefixes or further derivational affixes are added to these primary stems, so-called secondary derivatives develop. With nouns, the great bulk of these secondary derivatives form adjectives, which in turn may then get used as substantives in their own right. There are many more than I've shown here, and they can be roughly grouped into those which indicate possession, descendants or lineage, also called patronymic, those that form relational nouns, or show states, qualities or abstractions, and those that imply groups or collections. We're going to look at abstract nouns in a little more detail next, but for completeness, we can put this process all together and then can add that any derivative can be combined into a compound. And also, any of these nouns can undergo a further secondary derivation where they are transformed back into verbs called denominative verbs. A bit like from the word visual, we get the verb to visualize. Well, that's been a brief overview of derivation in Pali, and I hope it will help as you read through this section of Warda's guide. It is a highly theoretical area, and as all the secondary derivatives are usually listed in the dictionary as independent entries, it can largely be ignored, although I do find it helpful when I'm trying to get to the meaning of a word. Okay, so if we now look specifically at abstract nouns, an abstract noun is a word like truth, danger or happiness, and they denote an idea, quality or state rather than a concrete object. In English, they can be created in numerous ways, and one way is by the use of suffixes, and these are some common ones. In Pali, abstract nouns are often created also by a secondary suffix, that of ta or ta, which is then added to an existing stem. The suffix ta is feminine, whilst the suffix ta is neuter, although occasionally it's masculine. Well, hopefully you get the idea, so I'm not going to dwell on this. Next, let's skip to junction consonants. But just to say that this was actually covered in last week's lesson when we looked at Sandy. Right, let's now return to compounds in Pali. And in this lesson, Warda looks at adverbial compounds. This type of compound is usually easy to spot, as the first member is either a prefix or an indeclinable preposition or adverb, and the second member is usually a noun. They refer to an action in some way, indicating where or how the action is being done, and thus they are used as adverbs and are themselves indeclinable. And Warda lists quite a few examples. Well, I'm going to leave lesson 25 here. As always, there's a link below to the answers to the exercises. And in the next lesson, we have a full outline of numerals in Pali, our final look at compounds, and we detail a couple of rare participle endings. Until then, don't forget there's always my blog and my other tutorials.